Hello beautiful friends, I hope you're all doing incredibly well. I hope you're having a good winter so far. I'm coming back with another recent reads video. It has been a while since I've done one. I'm going to be talking about books that I haven't shared with you guys yet, but I'm also going to be going over books that I've already talked about in past videos, as in like reading vlogs and such. I like to combine them all in recent reads, so I'm sorry if you get annoyed of me repeating myself. I will put those more towards the end. I'll start off with the books that I haven't talked to you guys about yet. I obviously don't read that many books. That's why I don't really like to call myself like a booktuber or bookstagrammer, stuff like that, because I really am just like an average reader. I don't read like 10 books a month. I read like maybe 15 a year. I'm not pressuring myself to read more. I want to make sure that I'm enjoying what I'm reading. I just figured I would pre-warn you guys that you might hear me repeat myself about some things I've already said. So we're gonna start with my most recent read that I finished, I think probably like 2 weeks ago now, and I talked about it in my last video when I showed you my haul, because I did end up getting this for myself and I really enjoyed it, and that is Guardian by Kate Korsak. It's such a fun fantasy book, and it does have a lot of Christian allegories, which is what sold me initially. The quote on the back that kind of sums up the overall theme of this book, I guess, is "The one who destroys cannot create. This is balance." This is about the kingdom of Sanner. It's the only kingdom that has magic within the realm of Velikor. So here is Velikor and here is Sanner. And Sanner is like an elvish kingdom, so all the elves still have magic from the god Adoni, which, like I mentioned before, is a play on words for Adonai, because this is like very allegorical to the Bible. This is our main character Kyler, and he creates potions and such, and I really like the way that Kate did this because he is an alchemist, which I actually like recently learned that alchemy is like a science. Like, I always equated it with magic because a lot of fantasy stories add magic to it, but like alchemy just means transformation. Creating distilled water is a form of alchemy, and I didn't know that. So that was kind of cool to learn. But anyway, Kyler is basically like an herbalist, and then he alchemizes things, like transforms things with his magic from Adoni, and so he'll create potions that like heal people, or like it speeds up the ability that our bodies have to heal themselves. And then he has ones for like feeling joy or like sleeping and stuff like that. So I just really love the magic system in this because it's like kind of pure. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So there is the god Adoni, and then there is the god of destruction, who is Orisis, which obviously is the evil bad guy, right? They also have a dragon pass. So these dragons are like good guys. They're almost like angels, and they help Sanner protect Adoni's kingdom and the dragon pass, which leads to where Adoni lives. Sanner is attacked by Orisis and his minions, and so Kyler and a few of his soldiers go on an adventure to kind of find out more about Orisis and like why this attack is happening, where it's coming from. And it kind of comes from the concept of all the other kingdoms not having the magic of Adoni. So it's really hard to like explain without giving spoilers. Like, it's kind of a complex story too, but I really enjoyed it. I think I would settle on 3.5 stars, maybe 4. And my reasoning for it, it's not necessarily to do with the story itself, like part of it kind of is, but I was really bothered by, this is gonna sound kind of mean I guess because this is indie published, but there were a lot of typos in this story, and it kind of ruined it for me because it would snap me out of the story and like back into reality, and it just drove me nuts. And there are a lot of typos in this, a lot. Like, I literally almost DNF'd because there were so many typos and grammatical errors. That's just a really big thing to me. Like, when I get sucked into a world, that is guaranteed to like take me back out of it. So that was one of the main reasons. So it's not to do with like Kate's talent or anything like that, but I'll just leave it at that. Other than that, the story was great. The only other thing that kind of bothered me a little bit was that the fantasy ambiance kind of stopped really soon. So it started out very like fantasy-esque. There were a lot of things going on. They went to like this tavern that had like these floaty glowy lights, but then it kind of got a little confusing for me because I wasn't sure how modernism was put into it. Like, everywhere else when the lights were on in a room, I'm like, is there electricity or are there like lanterns? When somebody takes a bath, I'm like, is there like plumbing? So like, I wasn't sure how that all played into it. So after they kind of like left this tavern and stuff, like that was kind of where the fantasy ambiance kind of stopped. We didn't really get any more of that. Then it was just kind of like them on this adventure into the rest of the kingdom of Velikor, and there wasn't really a whole lot of like fantasy stuff. Like, there were other like races, other creatures and things like that, but that was pretty much it. And then I feel like there were also a lot of scenes and characters put into the story that were unnecessary. Like they were kind of just put in to make the book longer. Towards the end, there's kind of like a brief romance introduced, but I feel like it was really, really abrupt. Because it's kind of like, I don't know if enemies to lovers is the right trope for it. That's kind of what it was, but I feel like there wasn't really any growth to that. It kind of just like started. I don't really love the way that that was put in. Overall, I liked the story. It was fun. The concept was great. The characters were great. There was a lot of personal growth with Kyler, our main character, because he's very like grumpy and mean. And then he kind of grows throughout the story. Yeah, I don't know if that was the best review because my mind is kind of all over the place with how I feel about it. But if you want like a pure, no spice, closed door, not even really a romance, fun adventure, fantasy, high stakes, I would definitely recommend. It's a good book, and I'm looking forward to the next one in the series because this is like book 1 of the Velocore epic. I'm looking forward to the next book. The next book that I haven't talked to you guys about was Six of Crows. I loved this book. I don't know if I would give it 4.5 or 5. And if you don't know what this is about, I'd be surprised because this is a very, 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 very popular series in the bookish world. Six of Crows is about basically like a gang kind of, but it's fantasy. So there are like other aspects to it, not just like Peaky Blinders gang, which do not recommend. But anyway, so you have Kaz Brecker, who is like the leader of this gang, and they call themselves the Crows, and he owns like the Crow Club, and he is basically just like our morally gray character of the story. He's fantastic. I love him. He's wonderful, and he has other people in this gang. Jesper, he has Inej, he has Nina, and you get other people introduced as well. This is in a very cool world. So they call it the Grisha world, and Grisha are characters who have like these powers. They don't call it magic, they call it like small science, because the powers they have are like based off the elements in the world. It's really cool. I really love how she created those characters and those powers. I think it's really unique. So Kaz and the rest of the Crows are hired by somebody to seek this guy out, whom I'm not even going to try to remember how to pronounce his name right now, but basically he invented like an elixir that would superpower the Grisha powers. Heartrender would be able to do more than just slow somebody's heart or speed somebody's heart or kill them. They'd be able to like control the cells within somebody's heart or somebody's blood, basically like superpower their abilities, but in a horrible, horrible, horrible way, because it kind of slowly kills the Grisha, and the Grisha are under control of whoever gives them this elixir because it like addicts them basically. Kaz and his Crows go on this job, and there just ends up being a lot to it. They go to like this other land where they're not welcome, so they have to like sneak around. It's just a very fun adventure to be on, and there's just a lot to explain, so it's kind of hard to explain the synopsis of it. If you haven't seen the show Shadow and Bone on Netflix, I definitely recommend it because that's kind of the precursor to the Six of Crows book, and it gives you a really good introduction to Kaz and the rest of the Crows, and it's very easy to visualize them. I think that they casted that perfectly, by the way. I will say that this can get really dark because it is very violent, like Kaz Brecker. When you talk about morally gray men in the fantasy world, I am shocked that Kaz Brecker isn't mentioned more because he is like brutal. But his backstory really helps you understand why and like things that he's been through. Shadow and Bone isn't necessarily to read before this, I don't think. A lot of people say to, but I haven't read Shadow and Bone and I was able to follow this pretty well. There is a point where they have to sneak into a prison, and there is a lot that goes down, and there are a lot of twists and turns, and it's really, really fun. I don't want to say realistic because obviously like not real, but it's easier to imagine in our world because it's more like steampunk as opposed to adventure fantasy, if that makes sense. But anyway, I really enjoyed this, and I am very excited to read the next book. Up next is Just Don't Fall by Emma St. Clair, and this is so good. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5, and the only reason why I didn't give it 5 is because it was so cheesy. So we have our main characters Logan and Parker. So Logan was Parker's older brother's best friend. So when Parker was younger, she had the biggest crush on Logan, and he was always so sweet and kind to her, but he was also kind of like the bad boy a little bit. But he goes off and he becomes a like famous NHL professional player, and so when she grows up, she kind of like tries to move on, and when he comes back into town as an adult, she realizes that she never really quite lost her feelings for him. And the funny thing is that Parker is now a social media manager for their local like state hockey team, and Logan is coming to play for them. So now she has to work with him, and it is just so cute. The banter is so much fun, the slow burn is beautiful, and it is very, very, very cheesy. Like, if I wasn't so in love with the story and the characters of how they were coming together, I might have DNF'd, because the cheese is so strong in this book. Like, it is like cringy cheesy, but the story was just so much fun, and I really, really liked the characters. And Logan is just like, of course, written by a woman, so he's perfect in like every way, and we love him. But it's really funny, and there's a lot more to it than just like their romance. You find out a little bit more about Logan's backstory and why he was sent here and his inability to get along with other people on the team, but it ends up all transforming as he plays for this local smaller team outside of the NHL, and it's so much fun. So if you want like a clean, closed door, small town romance, I definitely recommend this one for the fall. And I should mention too that this is also a fake dating scenario. I love a good fake dating story, even though they're almost always the same with how they play out. It's still just like, it never gets old. I love it. As I'm flipping through it, I'm realizing like I actually did annotate quite a bit. Like, there were a lot of lines that I underlined and put hearts around. So this is just really fun and really cute. I definitely recommend picking this one up. The next one is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I loved this book. This was so good. I think I gave this 4.5 out of 5 as well. It is a thriller. So you have Alex, who is like a beautiful, successful mother. I think she's in her 40s. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And she kind of waited to like start her motherhood journey later in life. So I think she's like 45, and she has like a 5-year-old or something like that. So that's significant in the story, which is why I'm mentioning it. Alex has her own podcast, and she's basically just interviewing women and their stories of how they became successful, and alongside of things like motherhood. She ends up meeting somebody named Josie. Josie is somebody who got married very, very young. Basically, Josie kind of ends up becoming obsessed with Alex and asks to be on her podcast, and Alex is like, okay, sure, because she has like a very different story. Like, she's interviewed all these women of how they've become successful, and Josie is talking about how she's in the midst of that now. Like, in her mid-40s, she's just starting to write her story of how she's becoming successful and transformed and all of this stuff. And Josie is basically like kind of low-key crazy. She has a weird story with her daughters and her husband and her childhood. Like, things are just very odd. When you get to like the end of it and a lot of the twists happened, it's kind of one of those like scenarios where you're like, is she crazy? It's very fun. I think I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 solely because it does kind of have an open ending. Like I said, when you get to the end, you're kind of left with that question of like, was she actually telling like none of this is true? You know, like, was it actually true, or was she lying about all this stuff? And it kind of like leaves you thinking. Just for me personally, I don't love open ending books. Like, I want to know the truth. I want to know what happened. I don't want to sit here confused. I read a book so I can know what happened. So that is my only problem with this book. Other than that, I really loved everything about it pretty much. I mean, there are always going to be like little side concepts and things that I'm like, can we not? But I'm not really letting that play into this story solely because I was in this mainly for the mystery and not for any kind of odd side things. So overall, like I said, 4.5 out of 5. I really love this one. If you want a fun thriller, pick it up. There were a few parts that I was kind of like, oh yikes, but overall it is really fun. She is a fantastic author. Next book stirred some controversy for me, which is understandable. I'm not recommending this book. I'm not saying you should read it. I'm not saying you shouldn't read it. Go by your own discernment. So the next book that I read was Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. And like I said, this is a controversial one for me because I am a Christian and a lot of people are very anti like Harry Potter, which is fine. If you're that way, that is totally acceptable. You can be that, okay? I'm just gonna give my quick disclaimer that I always give when it comes to fantasy. My personal conviction is that if it cannot be practiced in real life, it's not something that I align with real witchcraft. Mind you, that does not have to be your conviction, okay? That's just where I'm at personally. I may or may not read the rest of the series. I don't know, I just don't know yet, okay? I will say I really enjoyed the story. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5. And honestly, I was very surprised that magic was a total back burner in the story. I don't love that it's called Hogwarts, the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. With that though, like when I read this book, I didn't see any like witchcraft in it, and some people might disagree. That's because they see magic as all being the same thing, whereas I see a difference between like fantasy pretend magic and real witchcraft magic, which the Bible condemns and warns us against. I have that boundary, some people don't, and that's fine. Anyway, all that to say, I'm not telling you you should read this. I'm not telling you you shouldn't read this. I'm saying pray about it and go according to your own conviction. Let's just leave it at that. But all that to say, it is very fun. It's very like friendship based. Like that was kind of the main thing. Like I said, I feel like magic was a back burner in the story. There wasn't really that much of it, which I was really surprised by. I love the friendship between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. I will say the thing that upset me is that they did not include their personalities very well in the movie. In the movie, they're like kind of weak and like kind of lame, and in the books they like stand up to Draco and they're willing to like fight, and it's just so great. Neville is my favorite character. I love Neville, he's so sweet, and it's just a fun time. And there are also so many biblical allegories in this book, especially when it came to the part with centaurs. Yeah, I think they're called centaurs. I was like, whoa, this has just got like really biblical for a second, like really deep. And there are a lot of YouTube videos out there of pastors and other just like, I guess, Christian influencers, you could call them, that have podcasts that talk about the biblical parallels within Harry Potter, because I guess J.K. Rowling has talked about how she purposely put biblical allegories in this story. So I think that's very interesting. I think J.K. Rowling is now a part of like the Church of England or the Church of Scotland, I can't remember which. She believes that the Christian parallels and allegories have always been really obvious, and so she's surprised when people don't see them, but I definitely did. I found that to be very interesting, and of course it gets even more biblical in the later stories, the later books and movies, including like the sacrifice and the resurrection and things like that. So I really enjoyed this book. I may or may not read the future ones, I don't know yet. I want to, but again, there is a lot of pushback that I've been getting, and I kind of have to pray about whether I'm experiencing conviction or if I'm experiencing guilt because of man. Because there are some people who are very unhappy with me reading books like this as a Christian, and some people don't believe I'm a Christian at all because I read Harry Potter. So it's like, I'm just gonna like take a seat and really pray about this instead of being led by man's judgment. So I don't know if I'm gonna read this series or not. Regardless, I really enjoyed the first one and I love the movies. Once again, do not listen to me about it. Pray about it for yourself, have your own discernment, and let the Lord lead you. Don't do what I'm telling you to do or not to do. So the next up was one of my favorite books of last year, and that is Autumn by the Sea by Melissa Tagg. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars, and I will have to talk more about my rating system in the future, but 5-star for me is like one of the best books ever. I will reread it in the future for sure. It's just fantastic, and it was just so much fun. The synopsis is a little lengthy, but long story short, there's a young girl named Sydney Rose who was abandoned as a baby, given up for adoption, and a private detective comes into her life later as an adult and says that he thinks he may have found her family. So she goes on a leap of faith and travels to Maine to meet her potential family, and the older lady that she meets that she believes may be her grandmother is named Maggie, and she is the sweetest thing ever. And she has an adopted son named Neil, who is adopted from Scotland, and he was adopted as a teenager, I believe, and he is just like such a man's man, and I just love him. There is a romance that sparks between not Maggie and Neil, oh my goodness, no, between Sydney and Neil, and it is just the sweetest thing. There is so much good banter and humor, and Melissa Tagg is also a Christian, so she puts a lot of like Christian themes in there. It's not pushy at all, so if you're not a Christian, I wouldn't even worry about that, because it is not like a pushy hardcore backbone theme. It's just like very subtle, and there's some quotes and like trusting the Lord and things like that, and it's just so beautiful, and I loved this book so much. And there are also 2 other girls that Maggie adopted who are like basically Neil's sisters, and the other 2 books in the series, I actually just got the second one from my friend Katie as a gift, called A Seaside Wonder, and that is a story that covers one of the sisters' stories. So it is just all gonna come to a wrap, and I'm so excited. But yeah, it's really just about found family and a romance. Like I said, Maggie owns like a blueberry farm that Neil works on, so there's also the story of that and saving the farm and hard times, and it's based in Maine. I don't remember if I said that or not, which is like a dream dream. I mean, look at that. It's just beautiful and I love it so much. There's also like an ancient legend that gets brought up, like a mystery around the farm and the land and things like that, and I think it's going to come up more in the other books. So I'm very much looking forward to reading the rest of the series. But again, if you want a closed door, spice-free, beautiful romance with found family and humor and banter, I recommend this book. I love it so much. So the last 3 books I'm just going to talk about all at once because 2 of them were DNFs. So the first one I did end up finishing and I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars, which is a bummer, and that is A Wilderness of Stars by Shay Earnshaw. I can never say her name right. Which was, like I said, a total bummer because I loved her other book called The History of Wild Places. I loved that book, so I was really looking forward to this one, and it ended up being really lame. I was so bored. And this is supposed to be like kind of an adventure fantasy thing. There's like a girl named Vega who lives in this valley and they're just like loners. The rest of the world has supposedly died from like this sickness, but there are like villages that survived or like towns that survived. Vega goes on this adventure because she is the last astronomer, so she sees the sign in the sky that it's her time to go out, which will supposedly lead to her finding the cure for this sickness that is plaguing the rest of the world. So it sounds fun, it sounds intriguing, it sounds like a fun adventure. I was so bored the whole time, and then the end was so disappointing. I would not consider this fantasy, I would consider it sci-fi, and the ending, it was just like a what? Like nothing even remotely hinted at the story taking that turn. I love a good twist, but I love twists when they're set upright, and this was not set upright. It basically gave me like a genre whiplash because I went from expecting this to be like a fantasy thing to all of a sudden, nope, science fiction. That didn't make any sense, and then it was very abrupt. Like I feel like the ending was just kind of made up in the moment. Yeah, it just was not my thing. And it's a bummer because this is like first edition autographed copy, but that's okay. This might be somebody else's vibe, it just was not mine. And then the last 2 books were both DNFs, and that is The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic. Again, I don't know if I already talked about this in a video or not, but I did DNF this after like 50 pages because it ended up being a little too witchy for me. Like I said, my boundary with magic is if it can be practiced in real life, then that's not my vibe. This was not that at first. Like it was a little bit kind of like superstitious, like the whole, you know, growing certain flowers because they bring you luck, or like using certain ingredients because they use this, and it was kind of like, okay, I don't love that, but we'll see where it goes. And then she ended up meeting with somebody who practiced tarot cards, and I was like, out. I'll be either throwing this book away or donating it. I'm not quite sure yet. I don't love putting books like this back out into the world for other people to read, but at the same time I also love freedom and the idea of people being able to read what they want, so I don't really know what I'm gonna do with it yet. And then the other DNF was The Poison Thread. Thankfully this one was from the dollar store, so I'm not too heartbroken about it. But I literally did not even start this book. I opened it up and then I was like, I feel like I should check the trigger warnings on this book. Like I just got like that impression, and so I did, and apparently this book is very dark and very messed up. There's like a lot of abuse in it, and it gets kind of crazy. And I read specifically that one of the warnings was a super traumatic birth, and that's not my vibe, especially not for me because I don't have kids yet. I would love to have kids one day, and I have a lot of anxiety around that concept, so putting this in my head is not something I want to do. So DNF'd immediately. I'll be getting rid of that one as well. So then I'll just close this out by showing you my 2 current reads, and that is Sparrow in the Sun by Danielle Bullen. This is a Christian-inspired fantasy, and then Knowing the Spirit by Costi Hinn. I'm loving it. It's changing my life. This book is about the Holy Spirit, so it says who he is, what he does, and how he can transform your Christian life. I have underlined and highlighted several times on every single page, so highly recommend. Like I said, changing my life. I'm learning so much. I love Costi Hinn. He's one of my favorite people to listen to about Christianity, and yes, recommend. Pick it up for sure. Sparrow in the Sun, I'm enjoying it so far. It's giving like 3-star vibes at the moment, but I'm also only 95 pages in. Things are just now starting to like actually happen. It does have a very slow start, and there were quite a few typos in it. Again, this is like self-published, indie published, I'm not quite sure, so it's understandable, but the few typos and misspellings kind of annoyed me, but I've gotten over it. There's more grammatical errors than there are spelling errors. I am enjoying the story so far though, so I'm definitely gonna keep on chugging with it. I'm really looking forward to now that we're getting into like stuff happening, and I don't really know how to explain it. All I can really tell you is that there's this girl, her name is Ennis, and she is an herbalist, and she is like from this race of people that are being taken out by the kingdom. I don't really know why. We'll see. She has these Queen's Guards that show up and need help, and so she helps them, and she's a little nervous too because it might mean her life. Again, I'm not really sure how to explain the synopsis because there's not a whole lot given about it. I am enjoying it so far, and I do believe that there is like a romance, and it is high fantasy, low magic. There's like a goblin so far, and like I said, Ennis is a herbalist, which I really love because it's not like witchy herbalism, and I always appreciate that. She has a dog, which I love, so I'm enjoying it so far, and I will definitely give you guys an update soon. So that is my recent reads. It's been a while since I've done a recent reads and talked about reviews, so I kind of had a hard time finding my words for a few of them. Thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you have had a very good New Year so far. If you love any of these books, let me know. If you didn't, let me know. I love you all so very much, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!